Hi, and welcome to episode number 5 of the And One Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Alex West, and on today's podcast, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, a special guest on the show, Justin Klose. Justin is a writer, and so we delve into something that we don't usually do a lot of. Usually we talk about 5-man plus minuses and Kevin Durant's defensive rating and the three-point shooting percentage and that kind of thing. But today we can do a little bit different. We talk about narrative. We get into a little bit of Kevin Durant, a little bit of LeBron James, and just their overall place in the narrative of the upcoming NBA Finals. It's a little bit of a longer pod. Taps out at close to an hour, but listen to it in parts, do whatever. I think you'll really enjoy it, so enjoy the show. Brent, take us away. Justin, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I didn't get the signal, but
he can see me. You all can't see me. I was supposed to give him a visual signal, and I didn't.
Okay. One thing I should ask right up front is cursing allowed?
Always.
Okay.
It's a lot like the woods, in that you can curse in the woods because no one is listening.
I'm thinking back to what I did in the woods, and it was a lot of peeing.
Yeah, well, this is basically the woods of the NBA podcasting world. You can do whatever you want because nobody's listening.
Okay, I had a question. I saw this quote from Kevin Durant. I think it was from after Game 3.
Okay.
Where you probably know the quote, but it was paraphrasing, if you don't want to watch blowouts, don't watch.
Yeah, I did see that. I'm trying to find the text of it, but I don't think it's that. Listen, I'm kind of with him. I don't really you don't have to watch. I've watched a lot of Warriors basketball because how good they are genuinely entertains me. And I know that I'm in the minority there, but watching the sheer excellence of Golden State has just been fun for me. Not for you, I take it? Is that your...
Well, no. Well, my question was, and why I preceded it with "Can I curse?" is my question from a casual fan.
Okay.
Is the narrative of, is Kevin Durant a dick? Or because I remember when he won the MVP and everyone was like, oh my God, just thanking his mom, and he teared up, and it was just she's the real MVP, and his small backpacks, and he was all shucks and never got into trouble. And then little by little, for somebody who didn't follow him religiously, all of a sudden he's all tatted up, and he's getting a little bit salty with the media, and he's been really salty ever since the Westbrook thing. Is this just has he always been this way, and we're just getting to know, in a relationship, we're getting to know the other person better?
No, I don't think he always has been this way. I think that there was a moment, and I think it was last year, or it may have been the year before the year he was injured, where he just stopped giving a single F about anything. And he there was a question, and I can't remember what it is. I can't put my finger on the exact moment, but somebody asked him a question in a press conference, and he said, he gave this salty answer, and then all of a sudden it was like the gloves were off. And then there was the guy, I don't know if you remember this, but this was 2 seasons ago. There was the guy who wrote the kind of scathing article in the Oklahoman. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, I think that was the moment where everything kind of flipped around, because Durant had been that exact guy that you're talking about, the aw shucks and you're the real MVP. And I think that he, for the first time in his life, sort of got a taste of how even your local media can turn on you when they don't feel like you've done the best that you can do. And I think that was the moment where he changed the way he interacted with the media. And listen, I'm all for it. I think it's great. I think it makes great television when Kevin Durant's mad at everybody. But I think that is a new thing, or a relatively new thing in the past couple of years.
Okay, because it's been, because you know, what's the phrase, showing your true character. Like, I believe that there has to be a little bit of that saltiness in there. Not to say that, like, he was always a dick, or, like, he was always not a dick, but I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. Like, you can be a dick and, like, have it be, like, Kobe was a dick.
Yeah.
And it was a good thing.
Well,
like, where I guess maybe for sake of articulation, I should stop calling him a dick and say, like a chip on his shoulder.
Okay, yeah.
And I wonder, like, it just seems like it seemed like he was covering it up, and there was that moment where he was like, all right, dude, if that article is going to come out and you're going to turn on me, like, I would expect someone like him to have that moment, to have that flare-up, and then to go back to the Kevin Durant aw shucks. And I felt like it was, in a good way, in, like, a very watchable way, like, almost a point of no return. That he was like, all right, dude, well, I'm not gonna play this game anymore.
As a follow-up to that, do you feel like that exact moment, that heel turn, like, played a part in going to the Warriors, where he just didn't care anymore? That he had been so poorly received in Oklahoma or around the league or by all these people that he didn't care what people thought. Do you think that had any bearing on his move to Oklahoma? I mean, to his move to Golden State?
If anything, I think it was a pointed reaction to leave Oklahoma. Was that your question?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's you think that he felt like they turned on him, and so he left in that way?
I think it was definitely a part of it.
Okay.
I think it must have been. Like, I think, me as a fan, like, I think he gave that city everything. And that somebody that high up could write an article as scathing as that. I think there was a part of him that was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm from outside Philadelphia, like, huge Allen Iverson fan. Like, every night when Allen Iverson was on the court, just, like, sacrificing his body. That would be the equivalent of me saying, like, I don't really think you're giving it your all, Iverson. Like, I think it would be on par with that. That he was so incensed. Like, how could you even hint at that?
So if you're following along here and you're not familiar with the story, I went and got the particulars. In 2014, in May of 2014, the Thunder were playing the Memphis Grizzlies in the second round, and Durant went through a particularly bad stretch where he wasn't shooting well, he wasn't playing particularly well, and the Oklahoman, which is the paper in Oklahoma City, ran a headline that said Mr. Unreliable. So that's sort of where we're coming from. That's what we're talking about, is the beginning of the undoing of the nice guy Kevin Durant. Is that sort of, I mean, you feel like that's a big part of it, Justin, and that when you come from this aw shucks guy down and then become a big player and become an important player and then losing the finals the year before, or losing the year before, do you feel like that had a big impact on him? Just seeing that in print, in big bold letters.
I think Mr. Unreliable meant one thing to every reader and meant another thing to him. For instance, like, I think other readers read Mr. Unreliable and said, like, oh, okay, he disappears in big moments. Whereas I think he took that to mean Mr. Unreliable in terms of effort, in terms of energy put in. That's my view of it.
No, I think that's good.
For some reason, it cut deeper. It wasn't just like, oh, he has bad stretches.
Do you think that it's ever a relationship that he can repair, or do you think he just doesn't really concern himself with it anymore? Do you put yourself in that position?
I think so. I think there's a part of him that will always live in Oklahoma City. I mean, similar to like the Brett Favre Green Bay Packers, You know, when they had that love fest a couple years ago when he came back, like all of this, like not speaking to each other. It's like, come on, man! Like you were meant to be together. Now, whether you know, keep on bringing up relationship analogies, but like whether Kevin Durant will ever, you know, reunite with the Oklahoma City Thunder, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think there's part of him that will always sort of belong there.
What's the most interesting question to you in the upcoming NBA Finals? Say let's just skip ahead a couple of days, and my beloved Boston Celtics probably aren't going to win 3 straight. Let's just skip ahead and say, in a couple of days that we're looking towards Cavs Warriors 3, what's the most interesting question to you in a narrative sense? What is the overarching story that this Finals tells you?
I mean, it's sort of a boring narrative, but like, like, are the Warriors really as amazing as we think they are?
No, I think that's a fair narrative, because the question becomes, and maybe Cleveland can prove us wrong or change it a little bit, but if they roll through this Finals in 4, 5, even 6 games, I mean, it's just total dominance.
Yeah, I mean, there's not even. I mean, you said it right there. Like, you know, maybe the Cavs can surprise us, but like just the way you phrased it is like they're not going to surprise us.
I honestly don't think so. Like, the more I look at it, the more I think about it, the more they just feel like undermanned. That Kevin Durant, I said this the other day to somebody, and just saying it aloud made me laugh, was the story last year was Draymond Green suspension in Game 5, Andrew Bogut is hurt, Andre Iguodala is hurt, not playing to his full potential. And then to flip that around this year and say, okay, well, Bogut moved on. Draymond's not suspended. Iguodala is still probably not healthy, but the big difference is, or the colossal difference is, you went from Harrison Barnes in that lineup to Kevin Durant. Like, that upgrade to me, when I said it, I hadn't even processed it, is that the Cavs eked by a great Warriors team, 73-9, don't get me wrong, but when it comes down to small sample size and one game and all these things that happen in the finals that don't happen across the course of the regular season, don't you think this Warriors team is better than last year's team?
Yeah, yes, because I think, and also there's the aspect of Steph Curry. Like, I think Steph Curry is at his most dangerous when you're thinking about somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, like, think about it. He was all anybody could talk about for not this past season, but the 2 seasons previous. Yeah. And like, it's about Kevin Durant and the Warriors, or it's about like, oh, like the other night, like Steph had a bad 3-point shooting night. He went 5 for 13, and oh yeah, he scored like 38 points or whatever he scored.
Yeah.
But he's not the thing. It's the Warriors. People mention the Warriors adding Kevin Durant. It's not even really about. I haven't heard on ESPN and Sports Talk Radio, like, I haven't heard a lot about the Splash Brothers.
Yeah.
And like, that narrative is going by the wayside because you have Kevin Durant.
And because Klay Thompson has sort of regressed. I mean, it's difficult to integrate 3 or 4 guys who need to touch the ball a lot, but less Klay Thompson than what we've had in years past. But even still, like, I think you make such a good point about the shift in focus of, you took the worst player in your starting lineup, Harrison Barnes, or in the lineup of death with Iguodala, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and then Harrison Barnes. You drop out Harrison Barnes and you replace him with Kevin Durant, and then all of a sudden it's shifted to, instead of your worst player, he's your best player, and then now Steph Curry becomes your second best player, and Draymond Green becomes your third best player, and Klay Thompson becomes your fourth best player, and it's such a shift in the way teams have to match up with you in that regard, because now you have to use your Kawhi Leonard or you're LeBron James to guard Durant, and then you start to have to fill in the pieces here. Well, who's going to guard Draymond? Well, who's going to guard Steph Curry? Well, who's going to guard Klay Thompson? And I think that kind of shift, like, even if they statistically weren't as great, their record wasn't as great, but I think when you start to talk about small sample size and a series of games, that's the questions that become much larger. Is like, guarding Kevin Durant just creates problems for everybody.
I feel like I have the same feeling of 2 finals ago. That, like, you know, the Cavs might eke out 2 wins, and the equivalent, like, Dellavedova had to get, like, rushed to the hospital after, game 2 or 3?
Yeah.
Like, that Dellavedova isn't on the team, but, like, the team of the Cavs now could pull a Dellavedova and eke out a win, but I feel like it's just they're so overmatched. And granted, I mean, they do have the best player in the world. You can't underestimate that, but I think it might be one of those series where if it's tied 2-2, it's going to feel like it's in the bag.
Yeah. Yeah, if you feel like you're going back home for a best of 3, Game 5 in Golden State, Game 6 in Cleveland, Game 7 in Golden State, that you're probably going to win 2 of those 3.
Yeah.
But I think, like, even more than that, do you see, outside of one of those LeBron James throwback performances, do you see a 2-2 tie in this? Or because my thing is like, everybody's put a lot of stock in this. You know, it's not been a great playoffs with sweeps on both sides. Both teams sort of cruising to the finals. I mean, a little bit of a bump losing Game 3 to the Celtics, but nothing major. There was never any threat to Cleveland. But I think a lot of people have put a lot of eggs in the finals is going to be great. It's going to make up for all of the shortcomings of the past series. And I don't know that that's going to happen. Do you?
No. I think the media will try and shape that narrative and try to, like, oh yes, it is. It's making up for all the sins of the former rounds. But I just don't see it. I think you might get a couple or many heroic performances from LeBron, and I don't think it's going to be nearly good enough. I think it's going to be entertaining, but I don't think it's going to be exciting, if that makes any sense.
All right, let me ask you another big question, because I've got one. First of all, let me preface it by saying I don't want to play LeBron James versus Michael Jordan in the game. Like that, I'm not interested in playing that right now. But let's talk legacy. Let's talk about what this means for LeBron. Let's say first it's a 6-game. They lose in 6 games. What do you think this does to LeBron's legacy as a player? Does it hurt it in any way, or is it such a lopsided team matchup that it doesn't?
I think what should happen, if the world was fair, I think it should be a draw. I don't think it should count as a loss in his finals record if he loses this round. And let me be very clear, like, I'm a LeBron fan. I think it should be just like null and void. Like, dude, you went up against the Warriors plus Kevin Durant. Like, come on, guys. Let's give him a pass.
All right. On the flip side of that, say they do win. Do you feel like that's a huge bump, legacy-wise?
Okay, this is hard to answer because okay, I think if he does win, if the stars align and he does win, I think the things that will have had to have happened for him to be able to win, it will become about that. It will become about, well, Iguodala, you know, he was gone for 5 games, and Klay Thompson tweaked his ankle, and it'll be about some injury, or it'll be about some bullshit thing that Draymond Green kicked somebody in the balls and get in the pivotal Game 5, and the Cavs win, but the narrative will be, you know,
the Warriors lost.
Similar to last year. You know, like, oh, if only Draymond hadn't been out for that game.
Yeah, I kind of think that there was such an overwhelming performance by LeBron in games 5, 6, and 7 that in game 5, you're exactly right that was the narrative. But I kind of think he flipped it on its head because he played so well, particularly in game 7 in the deciding game with the block. I mean, one of the all-time great finals moments in any of our lives by any measure. That block is something that I'll remember where I was sitting for the rest of my life. But I think that his performance, he played so well that he flipped the narrative, and we didn't say the Warriors lost. We say LeBron won. You don't think that that's a possibility? I mean, you think that they're overwhelmingly underdogs, even more so than last year? Yes. To answer that last question, I think they are bigger underdogs. But I mean, with LeBron, people are so divided. Like, you see what you want to see. I think if he wins, he will get more people who are neutral or who are really impressed with his performance last year. I think you'll get some people moving over to the side of like, yeah, he's pretty good. Like, I mean, there are people who just made up their mind with the decision that they didn't like LeBron, and I think those kinds of people will cling to the narrative I conjectured that it was because Durant got injured in Game 3. And it's less, people don't want to give LeBron credit for anything. Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. There's a lot of there's just that romance of the past that plays so much into basketball. Not you and I in particular, but we the fan, we don't want anything to challenge Jordan's legacy because we want to remember Jordan is the best, and I think that plays into it a lot. The fact that there is that kind of romance for the past, and we don't want LeBron to be the best because we want Jordan to be the best. For some, I think if LeBron's the best, he's the best, but I think that a lot of people don't want him to be and will go out of their way to slant the narrative away from it.
Because I think yeah, I mean, without going down the road of Jordan versus LeBron, I'll just say that I think people love the cleanliness of Jordan's narrative. Like
the
and then he goes away, and then he comes back for a 3-peat.
Yeah.
That I don't think his legacy. I think it would be slightly dinged if he won like 2, lost 1, and then won another.
Yeah, no. That's I even have sort of a problem from not the Celtics fan in me, but the basketball fan in me. I have a problem reconciling LeBron. When you talk about LeBron in the pantheon of great players ever, there are 2 things that stick out to me that really, really hurt, and one of them is the 2011 finals when they played Dallas, when he was clearly the best player. And they were the better team, and they lost. Like, that hurts. And I think that's, like, the opposite of what you're saying about Jordan is, like, once he got over the hump, he just won.
Yeah. And the fact that it was that was his first year in Miami, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that 1-2 punch of, like, coming, obviously, like, that year of the decision, and the fact that his performance was as such in the 2011 finals, it's like, oh man. I mean, to those folks who were inclined to not give him any benefit of the doubt, like, you just gave them all more than enough ammunition than they needed.
And granted, LeBron went on to beat the Spurs, the 2013, and then win again last year, and so he's done a lot. But I feel like there's trouble when you do the exact thing I said I wasn't going to do, but when you start to compare legacies, when you
pulling me back in.
when you start to compare legacies, I think that's one of the issues you run into, and I really do want to be. I really try to take the Celtics fan out of me. I mean, he lives in me. Don't get me wrong. You can't see me right now, people listening, but I am wearing a Boston Celtics hat in line with the loss in Game 4. But I try to set that aside when I think about, as a writer, as an analyst, as a whatever. to sort of look at LeBron from a middle place, and that's the thing that I keep coming back to is how much the series in 2011 and then how much the series in 2014 and people, I don't know, people.
Wait. 2014 was the Spurs series.
The Spurs series when they beat them in 13 and then lost in 14.
I mean, look at. You think okay? As a casual fan, I think of the Spurs fan. I think of that Spurs series, and the first thing I think of, the first thing people bring up, Ray Allen shot.
Okay, the 2013 one, yeah.
Oh, was that 2013?
That was 13 because that was Game 6. They were losing. They're down 5. They come back, they score, and then Ray Allen gets the ball, hits the 3. They tie it. That was in Miami. That was Game 6 in Miami. And then they win in Game 7 in San Antonio. But that was the 13 series, the Ray Allen shot, because that's another one of the flashbulb moments of NBA Finals history.
But I'm saying, like, he doesn't get a lot of credit for that series. It's more, the Spurs should have won. And if Ray Allen doesn't step back and make that unbelievable shot, then the Spurs would have won and they should have won. And so nowhere in that narrative is like, but LeBron is really good and played really good in that series. That it becomes, for some reason, it becomes very easy to what's the word?
Dismiss?
Yeah, dismiss him.
I mean, yeah, I tend to agree with you. Not that in a dismissive way. I don't think that I wouldn't dismiss the 2013 performance. I really wouldn't dismiss a lot of. I think because here's my example of like 2007 losing in the 2007 finals to the Spurs. To me, is more contributes to LeBron's greatness as a player than takes away from it, because he got them there with a particularly bad team. And so I don't know,
man. Mo Williams.
Zarunda Silkauskas.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
He's pretty good.
But like, that's what I mean is like, there are parts of LeBron's career, like that is the 07 finals is LeBron's 86 Bulls versus Celtics series where Jordan lights up the Celtics 3 times and they get swept. And you go like, okay, that's the next big thing. But then, like, as you go along in LeBron's career, I do think it becomes harder. It becomes easier to dismiss. I mean, not rightfully. I'm not saying that. I don't want to endorse the dismissal, but I do think it becomes easier to dismiss some of his accomplishments and say, well, Draymond was out in Game 5, or, well, Ray Allen hits this shot, and then that's what you're alluding to, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also like the changing times. You know, the fact that we get
elaborate on
we
this.
have wall-to-wall 24-hour news coverage. I mean, we've complained about this in the past, like, oh my God, it's like SportsCenter has become unbearable. They'll show one highlight and then talk about it for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Instead of just having the tight half-hour to hour-long show of just highlights, and then they would repeat the whole show back to back to back to back to back. That was more entertaining to me than, like, showing, Indians-Orioles, and then, like, let's discuss it for a while.
Or even now, further beyond that, is like, now we're talking about LeVar Ball 24/7.
Oh, my God, yeah. Like, LeVar Ball, a million LeVar Balls existed. But we just didn't give a shit. We're like, okay, this dad's trying to get paid. Okay, moving on. That I think, and then bringing that to LeBron, is that I think we've just gotten more access to him. So, I mean, Michael Jordan, that salty son of a gun, if we had more access to him, we'd be like, oh, God.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. There's no question that if we knew more about Jordan, or if Jordan he was very fortunate to not live in the time of Twitter and TMZ and, cheating on his wife and privacy. Like, that he wasn't subjected to as much scrutiny as a guy like LeBron is. Or, the ultimate one in that the flu game is not a flu game at all, that Jordan was massively hungover.
Right. But I mean, and the changing times, like the fact that you could make a big three in Miami, like just the world of basketball changing. That I think that had something to do with it. Like,
and I think that's harder. I think that's harder for older fans to reconcile with. When, like, well, Bird didn't move around, Jordan didn't move, Magic didn't move, Bill Russell. But, like, well, you couldn't. That was the players had very limited power.
Right. And we talk about this with like millennials, like how, like, my dad has worked 2 jobs his entire life. The first one he stayed at for 20 years, and the next one he'll stay at for 35, 40 years, and then he'll retire. I think I put him at like 110. But you get my point. Like, my father was born. He was actually born on the Titanic. He swam away.
He's 243 years old when he retires.
Him and Moses, really tight. Anyway. No, but like, my father worked 2 jobs, and the reason he worked 2 jobs is because he kept on getting raises, and there was a lot of upward mobility. And nowadays, like, people, friends of mine in corporate America, they work for 5 years, and they're like, okay, well, I've reached my ceiling, so I guess I'll go to another company and move up. Like, there's a reason why people move from company to company. It's not that they're just bored, or we're ADD, attention deficit disorder, addled, Ritalin-addled millennials. It's that there's not the opportunity that there was.
So you're saying that the move from Cleveland to Miami, the big LeBron move, that's about upward mobility? I mean, obviously there's a million factors at play that we don't know about, but you think that that's part of it? Is just being able to do, to achieve more?
And in this analogy, like LeBron's the wonder kid. And he's like, yeah, like I have some thoughts about how things should run, and Pat Riley and the company of the Miami Heat, very manipulatively said, like, sure, yeah, we'll listen to you. So I think LeBron, part of the upward mobility is like having more of a say, feeling more appreciative. I mean, he was loved and appreciated in Cleveland the first round, but like,
well, not by the you don't know what's behind the scenes, but not by the organization, or at least the optics weren't that he was appreciated behind, because not fielding a particularly competitive supporting cast versus what Miami was willing to do.
For sure, yeah. And then, like, he comes back to Cleveland and he's like, yeah, that guy, and then they get that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it started, as soon as he wrote that fantastic letter. What was, like, I thought like it was either that day or the next day it was like Kevin Love.
I remember that we talked about it when it went down, how interesting it was that he had left out certain names. And he left out Anthony Bennett from the letter, and he left out Andrew Wiggins from the letter.
Yes.
And then sure, lo and behold, that those 2 people were shipped out in a deal for Kevin Love.
Right. And I think, I mean, who always says, is it Ryan Russillo? He always says, like, people want more power. Nobody wants less power. And I think that, using this metaphor of upward mobility, like, having more of a say, having more power, whether, like, it's more benefits. Maybe your pay doesn't increase in this analogy, but your benefits do, and you get more paid time off. And you get to pick, the decor and where your office is. Like, that stuff matters.
Yeah.
And I think we've gotten a window into that sort of, at times, unseemly business of like, oh, wait, how much power does LeBron have to choose the team? Whereas we didn't know any of that shit about Jordan.
Right. And I think that's a big difference of... Nobody's gonna know. I think that's a big difference in the players, is like just how much we know about them. And I think we think a certain thing about LeBron that may also be true of Jordan, of that he pushed Jerry Reindorf and all the people behind the scenes in Chicago to do these things, but we just didn't know it. And with LeBron, that we know it, and that sort of colors our perception of who he is as a person and as a player.
I remember, having my buddy tell me, like, learning that Jordan screamed at people all day, every day to make them better. And that ruined whatever golden version of Jordan I had in my mind. Like, I had pictured the 10-year-old self in me, had always pictured Jordan when I thought about him talking to his teammates of like, way to go, Scotty. And like, great shot, Horace Grant.
Instead, it's shoot it, you fucking midget. Like,
right, exactly. Like, that is so much closer to the reality. But It's like, excuse me?
I think it's interesting how jaded our perception has become of people in the post. I mean, honestly, it's got to be within the past 10 years that we've changed the way we look at professional athletes altogether. There's much more skepticism and much more. We take a much more negative light. Whereas when you talk about guys like, even outside of basketball, you talk about Terry Bradshaw, and how there's just reverence around him, or Joe Montana, or all the guys that existed in the world prior to Twitter and TMZ and all the outlets that every single person in the world has in their pocket now, that just didn't exist. And so our perception was much more controlled. And I think guys like LeBron have such, I don't know how to say this correctly, but he has less control over his PR image than guys like, Johnny Carson's the perfect example of this. Of like, Johnny Carson was America's buddy, he was America's sweetheart, but when it went off, he was womanizing and got beat up by the mob. Right. We just didn't know.
Like Scottie Pippen. So I've had many, you might know this. I've had many people tell me who have worked in the service industry in New York and Chicago that Scottie Pippen is a famously shitty tipper.
No tipping Pippen.
Like, that, I mean, basically, Scott Van Pelt has said multiple times, like, I'll overtip just because I don't want to be that guy. Like, he doesn't want to say, like, oh, Scott Van Pelt only can afford, like, 15%. Because it doesn't even matter. Like, sometimes I want to tip, he said, like, sometimes I want to tip 15% because the service wasn't that good, but I can't because nobody cares about that narrative. They just want the narrative of, oh, SVP's a cheap asshole.
Yeah.
And Scottie Pippen, no tipping Pippen.
No tipping Pippen. You never heard that?
Well, no, I have, but like, I don't think at the time people, like, maybe that was a thing that people knew in Chicago. But
well,
the fact that
you couldn't know. That's the thing, is like, the Tribune, it's not leading the Post, like nobody's, but
right.
Because you have so much access, because we have so many outlets, because we do have ESPN, but we also have Bleacher Report, but we also have 15 other sites that are doing frontline reporting, not just analysis, not just writing about games, but like people who are on the street who said like, oh, Boris Diaw was partying in a New York club last night. Like, there's just so many ways for, or the example from this playoffs is the TMZ story about James Harden, who was out partying the night after the Game 6 where he just shit the bed when they were playing Houston. And he was out partying. But like, that's what I mean, is like, there's so much more access that you can't control what gets out there. And I think that LeBron's sort of been a casualty. To bring it full circle, I think LeBron's been a casualty of that era, or what we think about him has been a casualty of that era because we've had so much access.
Yes. And I think you could extrapolate it, I mean, taking it outside of LeBron, like, well, he's a casualty of I'm going to put on my old man, you crazy kids hat.
All right.
Like, we, God, I sound like such a conspiracy theorist, but like, we are fed things, and we get fed them, so we think that we want them. Like, I don't give a shit about what any athlete thinks.
Yes.
Like, I okay, there was this moment in the last Summer Olympics. Simone Biles was absolutely breathtaking to watch. breathtaking. And she was a powerhouse, and I loved watching her. And she seems like so mature and so graceful. And then she opens her mouth. And, she's talking with her teammates. And then the realization rushes in, like, oh my God, she's a 19-year-old girl who has been doing one thing her whole life. They mic'd up the gymnastics team, and it was just like, oh my God, you were so good. No, you were so good. Oh my God, like, I love your hair. And it was like, oh my God, these amazing performers are these totally different people, are real people. And I didn't want to have that bubble burst. I wanted to think that Simone Biles would speak something like Sigourney Weaver, like, yes, I had a very good routine. But she doesn't, because she's a 19-year-old girl with a very high-pitched voice. But we were fed all these things about, like, oh, did you see what the Bennett brothers said? And this is what Colin Kaepernick thinks. And this is what LeBron said and Chris Paul said. Like, I just play basketball. I don't, and this extends to most every celebrities. Like, the other day I was in a barber shop, and I don't know why, but I opened In Touch magazine, and there was just, I look at it for the hot women.
Okay.
And there was, whatever, name a celebrity. There was, I was going to say Tom Sizemore, but I think he's dead.
No, you know what? Tom Sizemore.
It's okay. It was Tom Sizemore, posthumously.
Okay.
And it was like 25 things you didn't know about Tom Sizemore. And
he's not dead, by the way. He's alive.
He's alive.
He's
okay.
alive.
But
so that's one of the things you didn't. That's one of the things you read. number 17.
Number one, I'm alive.
Was that Tom Sizemore is still alive despite his battles with drugs?
25 things about Tom Sizemore you didn't know. I'm alive. No, but I think if the global media just decided, hey, let's not put 25 things you didn't know about Tom Sizemore, we wouldn't miss it. I think we want it because we're given it. We want the access because we're given the access.
Wow, that is just... I mean, that's... Just to say that when you think about it, yeah, that's probably true. You probably wouldn't miss knowing what LeBron had for lunch on Cinco de Mayo. If we didn't know it, we didn't have it. I think, and people have gotten so good at providing the narrative. My parents are huge Voice fans. Okay. And
they just had the finale tonight. Some guy named Chris won. I don't know anything about him, but he won. Congratulations. But no, I think back to when I was in college when American Idol came out, and people knew a little bit about the contestants. They knew that Justin Guarini or whatever, I knew of him because he had gone to University Arts where I went my freshman year. Okay. He went to school with my older brother. So I knew that he grew up wherever he grew up, and, he had whatever jobs. I knew a little bit about his narrative because he was 6 degrees from me. But sometimes earlier in the season, I would watch The Voice with my parents, and every single person that performed, they would be like, oh, yeah, she's a single mother, her mother died when she was 17, and they give her whole life story. They know so much about her. And I just think, it's genius. Obviously you care more about people that you know more about. I don't know what my point is, but that's so crazy.
No, I think that your point, or if I'm going to attempt to summarize it, is that we've just
there's a helicopter going past.
I hear that. Is that the more we dig after the narrative, where I think maybe we didn't, because back in the day, or just quote unquote back in the day, we didn't know we didn't have the narrative, and so we had to subsist on what existed, what we saw. So the story around Michael Jordan or the story around Larry Bird was how great of a basketball player this person was, and that you thought they were the Simone Biles. You thought it was eat, sleep, breathe basketball. And now that you know that other things exist, you have a much more negative view just because there are more negative things. You know more about LeBron, so the more familiarity breeds contempt. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, the narrative was Magic Johnson's really good at basketball. Larry Bird's really good at basketball. That was the narrative.
Because that was all we had to build on. There was no media beyond what Larry Bird did on the basketball court.
And that's partly why it was so disconcerting when Magic Johnson came out and announced that he was HIV positive, because, I mean, when was that, 92, 93?
Yeah.
So I was 10 or 11, and it's like, oh, okay, he has HIV, and then I had to go back, when I found out how you got it, and then you hear that, like, oh, he slept with thousands of women. And me in my young mind, I had to go back and fill that part of Magic Johnson, fill in that part of his narrative with the bare bones narrative that I had had up until that point, and it was very disconcerting.
It was 91. It was November 7th, 1991. But yeah, the point standing. Sort of to get way off topic, I think that there was a moment in society when we broke the fourth wall, where the comings and goings of celebrities, and I think that moment was the Clinton Monica Lewinsky thing, was the affair, the White House, all the things that came out of that. I think that was the moment where, and maybe it was before that, I mean, maybe I'm just sort of speaking as someone my age, but that's the moment I remember, like, when we began to care about more than what we were given, where we started to dig deeper.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. That's just throwing it out there. Like, I don't have anything to back that up with, but like, that's the moment that I remember. It very similar to what you said. Maybe even goes back to Magic, but like, that was when parents had to explain to their children what blowjobs were over breakfast. I mean, you know what I mean, though?
Right. Well, like, I mean, I remember thinking, even then, even when I was, a young teenager, I often have this feeling as a 34-year-old man. I'm like, why do I know this? Why do I know this about this person?
Yeah.
That, like, I know what him and Monica did with the cigar. I know what was on her dress, like, what landed on her dress. Like, why? What I should know is that he had an extramarital affair with an intern or whatever the hell Monica Lewinsky was. That's the end of it. And then maybe one guy I meet at a cocktail party is like, oh yeah, dude, I got the skinny. Let me tell you what happened, what he did with the cigar. Like, that's how we should have learned, how people should have learned about the cigar, if they ever learned about it. Like, why the hell do we know all the lurid details?
Yeah, we've gone so far beyond the scope of what I thought this was going to be, but it's good. I mean, it's interesting to talk about. I spend so much time. I kind of bury my head in the NBA, and that's because that's something I want to pursue a career in, all these things. But it's very fun to step back and talk about the human element of sports, because we do talk about it a lot, but I feel like we don't talk about talking about it a lot. You know what I mean? Is like, we don't examine why we care so much about the human element. I think that's what we've done here, is a little bit of digging into why do we care about Kevin Durant and the Oklahoman and LeBron James.
Sure. I was reading, this is related, but it's an offshoot. It was there was a podcast I was listening to about, this is going to get really meta, podcast about podcasts. But they were talking about, basically, just as a consumer, to think about the other 13 people on the other side of the screen, whose whole job is to make you to stare at the screen longer. To sort of be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
And just being aware of, like, oh, people want us to know this shit for no other reason than for us to know this shit. Like, obviously, the Kardashians are the perfect example of, like, people know so much about them. Or Jimmy Kimmel does that, like, who knows themselves better, the celebrity or the crazy celebrity fan?
Yeah.
And usually it's the celebrity fan, and that's we reward that sort of intimacy. I mean, yes, Jimmy Kimmel laughs at that fan because that's to the nth degree, but like, you know, maybe my point is my parents should be able to watch The Voice and be like, hey, that guy named Craig has a really good voice, without knowing that he's like a single father of two twin girls who had epilepsy and bipolar disorder and had flipper fingers.
You're advocating for a return to the curtain, if you will, the curtain between the stars and the people.
Yes, like a return to intimacy with the people in your own life. Like I often get this with I've worked in restaurants for years, and I just had this moment. Like, I've worked with this guy, and for the last 3 months, and we work 5 days a week together. And it occurred to me, and this often happens in restaurants, where I just looked at him, I was like, I don't know your last name. Like, we have been in the shit together, and I know next to nothing about him.
Yeah.
And yet I know a lot about, through my parents, that guy from The Voice. Like, why?
Or a lot about LeBron James.
Yeah. Or like I mean, obviously Colin Kaepernick was very vocal about his opinions, but like, why the hell do I know his opinions?
About anything.
I don't, yeah. Like,
I don't care what his opinions are about running a spread option, frankly, but...
Exactly. I don't know. I mean, there's no, there's no getting the genie back in the bottle.
Oh yeah, but, yeah, you're totally right. We've gone so far to where we are now that there's no going back. Because and you touched on it earlier, because people value where we are. We value that kind of access to people that are famous.
Yeah, I often marvel at just how little things can blow up, and all of a sudden you're the celebrity that's known for that.
Yeah. All right, let's do a quick back to basketball. Let's do a lightning round on back to basketball, and then I'll let you go because I know that you're a busy man.
I got to catch up on The Voice.
You got to catch up on The Voice.
I got to watch the whole season tonight.
Well, you already know who Chris wins. I'm spoiled for you.
Oh, damn it! I forgot on purpose.
Yeah, well, Chris wins. All right. What's your finals prediction?
4 games to 1, and the one game the Cavaliers win, somebody has to be hospitalized.
Okay, and how many of them are blowouts?
Oh. If it's 5 games, I'm gonna go safe and say 3.
3 blowouts.
Wait, what's a blowout?
I don't know, 20 plus.
Oh. 20 plus?
Yeah.
I would say 2.
Okay.
But I would say 2 are like in the 15 to 20 range.
Okay, so you don't think that you think Cleveland wins 1 and there's probably not another close game in the bunch? Do you think the Cleveland game is going to be close, the one they win?
Just to be, I'll say no.
I'll say
they win. I'll say they win by 10 points.
Okay, all right. Who's your Finals MVP?
Mo Williams.
Okay.
I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say Draymond.
Draymond. Okay. See, I think it's got to be Durant. I just, regardless of how it goes down, I think that Durant's gonna get it. I mean, he's got to play decently well. But if everybody plays at the level that they're playing at now and nobody really wows you, it's got to be Durant, right?
Do you think there's any backlash with him?
No.
No?
No, I mean, the fan is upset, but I think most people who have a vote or care about this kind of thing are like, yeah, you got to go with what happens between the lines when you vote for, like, Finals MVP is such a small, you're voting on what happened during the finals versus like how the narrative of, we didn't even get into this. I wanted to talk about who won the MVP, but like narrative plays such a big part in the league MVP versus in the finals MVP. It really is about, for the most part, it is about what happens between the lines.
Okay, quick question for you.
Yeah.
How many years do you think, let's say that the basic nucleus of the Warriors stays the same.
Okay.
How many, regardless of whether they win or lose, let's say they go to the next 4 straight finals, which
doesn't seem crazy.
Doesn't seem crazy. But how many years after this do you think, when do we start saying the Warriors and not saying the Warriors plus Kevin Durant?
Ooh, that's not the question that I thought you were going to ask at all. I think if they win, it's just the Warriors. Like if they win this year, I think they're just the Warriors now. Because had they won last year, I don't think we would be able to do it so quickly. But because they lost last year, and then they're going to come back and win, and Durant's going to be on the team, and if Durant is the guy, if he has one of those like crazy, like Game 4 against the Spurs where he was completely undefendable, if he has one or two of those, I think that he just becomes part of the Warriors then.
Does that change if they lose?
Yeah. If they lose, I mean, I don't want to be Mr. Hot Take, but like if they lose, I could see him not being there in a year or two.
Whoa, yeah. Saving the bold prediction for the end.
Yeah,
holy moly!
I mean, I just think that we're in such a place in the NBA where you try this thing out. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. I mean, obviously there's personality differences behind the scenes. They're not necessarily best friends in the world, and I think Durant might explore his options elsewhere if they don't win. He might not.
Who is Kevin Durant's best friend in the world? Go.
Oh my God. Clay. It's Clay. Clay Thompson is his best friend in the world.
In the whole
world. It's Clay Thompson.
He's played with him for less than a year in the whole world.
If he had to pick one guy to save his life, to like pay a ransom to the mob, it would be Clay Thompson.
I mean, you could do worse.
Yeah, I feel like Clay Thompson might get lost on the way to the drop-off.
You had one job.
And then
you had one job.
You lost Kevin Durant.
He's 8'4".
And now he plays for some team in Russia because they kidnapped him. Thanks, Clay.
The Moscow Sputnik.
Well, Justin, it was a pleasure. This is by far the longest podcast, but
oh God.
But that's the risk you run when you get the writer on the show, is just give him the platform and let him run with it.
No, you know what this is? This is when you say, "Hey, go work a 12-hour day and then come home, drink a lot of coffee, and then put a microphone in front of your face." That's what just happened.
Hey, can you ramble for an hour? And then I said about the NBA, and you're like, "I can ramble for an hour about anything." And then you proceeded to prove it.
I got this.
All right. Well, thanks, Justin. Thanks for coming on. It was a real pleasure. And we'll talk to you later.
Thank you for having me, sir. You have a good night.
Very special thank you to our guest, Justin Klose, for being a part of the show. It's always nice to have guests on, talk a little basketball. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, and1 Analytics. Check out the blog. It's and1analytics.blogspot.com. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Listen to us on YouTube. If you have anything to contribute to the show, email me at and1analytics.blogspot.com. Love to hear from you. So until next time, I'm your host, Alex West. Good night.